Thanks very much. My name is Kath Rogers, and I've been asked to talk about a church developing compassion and commerce in order to serve its community. I'm talking about the Church of All Saints with St Fried's, which covers East Crosby and the Cinque Estates of Thornton. Today's conference talks about, well, I wouldn't want to start from here. Well, I think 10 years ago, I wouldn't particularly have wanted to start with two failing churches, one of which had failed so dramatically that they approached their neighbouring church to ask whether they could leave their falling down building and join together with them, and the 17 remaining members joined together in a combined church. I thought the average age of the 17 members was about 75, but when I started doing funerals, I found out it was about 90. Their children were 70. So we started off with All Saints with St Fried's. They had a sum of money because St Fried's had been dedicated, not consecrated. And it was burning a bit of a hole in their pocket. And when they got the new vicar, they thought the first thing we'd do would be to reorder the church. And the first thing I did was say, no, we don't. The first thing we do is actually reach out to our communities, and we actually start listening to them and finding out what's needed. And we did that for about 3 years. We found out one of the things that was really needed was a place to meet. There were 2 big community schools opposite the church, and the mums used to stand outside, freezing, talking. We realised when we looked at the demographics and the census information that we were actually up a 10% index of multiple deprivation on long-term health and disability. We were also up at 20% in unemployment and low income. And actually we had a huge proportion of post-war housing where individuals lived on their own. Loneliness was a real problem. So we decided that we wanted to help the long-term disabled, those on benefits, the bereaved, the mentally ill and the lonely, and we talked to service providers like the Citizens Advice area in Bootle and other places about what they thought was needed. And we consulted with school teachers and other people. We asked the community what they felt. We then did a major reordering 5 years later on, and the Church Council were brave enough to put most of the money not into the worship area, but actually into developing a community hub and better hall facilities. That's our community hub. It's a front extension, and it's wonderful. We were blessed by the sale of the land, but we had an incredible gift day and raised over £68,000 from a small congregation, primarily retired or on benefits, with only 10 people actually in employment. That was a miracle. We also got some grants. Compassion was all centred on the community hub. It was going to be a cafe space with access to a votive stand and a prayer corner. We were really influenced by Richard Giles, or Gills, I never know how to pronounce it, repitching the tent. And we actually got through 900 votive candles in 9 months. People prayed. We had a brilliant response from the community and the church for volunteers. And our barista training, yes, we have baristas. They were trained in listening, in cycle of bereavement, in pastoral care, in how to pray with people when they wanted prayer, and updated safeguarding. We recruited money assessors, more from the community than the church. They were trained with grants from J. Holt Foundation and John Moore's Foundation, who also prayed for citizens' advice sessions fortnightly, because it was 3 buses to get from Thornton to the CAB in Bootle. The business plan was vitally important so that we could continue when the grants expired. The barista, they're really expensive, the coffee machines, but we found a local coffee roaster, Joe Black's, who also supplies the cathedral, and it is exceedingly good coffee. It's ethical, and we could rent the machine, and they serviced it, and they did the training. We knew we only had to sell 15 cups of cappuccino a week to pay the rent on the machine. We also decided that you needed to be able to get a cup of tea or a coffee for £1, and if you couldn't afford it, we wouldn't even charge that, so it was good quality filter coffee for £1. We undercut the Costa a mile away in the city centre so that the mums would come to us and buy their cappuccinos and tea cakes. The hub started the advice sessions, dementia support groups with Keystone, a local charity based at St Luke's, our neighbours. But then mindfulness started because lots of people were coming with anxiety. A bereavement group started. Eco Church started with people from the community. Men loved coming for coffees and they loved getting stuck in and doing the community orchard. And we got up to Silver Award in 2 years. The local councillors asked to hold surgeries. We got more volunteers and more coffee drinkers joining the church and becoming key people in the church. A third of the PCC now were not church members and some not Christians 10 years ago, and we had the 11 confirmations in 2 years. And what I was really pleased about was members from the previously hard to reach, more deprived estates in the parish. Finally, we were being with and working with the whole parish. Quote from Sam's books. And commerce took off too. We sold more coffee and tea cakes priced reasonably than we ever imagined. Local nursing homes and groups came regularly. Slimming World asked to use our church nave. It was a great space for them. And it was amazing how much I needed to pop into church on a Wednesday afternoon, and I could pray if anyone needed it. Before Aintree Racecourse, we actually all prayed for self-control before they got on the pop on the Saturday afternoon. A local choir came and asked to use our church. I asked if they'd do a concert to help raise funds for the Children's Society, and they loved it that Christmas. The NHS and the diocese used us for training events, and our hall lettings increased dramatically. The pandemic has caused wobbles, but it's also given unexpected blessings. The real loss was that our Citizens Advice Advisor, who was only young, died of COVID, and Citizens Advice Sefton have really struggled to get back on their feet. One of our volunteers was badly hurt in a road accident, and they need updated training, and that's not restarted yet, but the plan is for it to resume. What was great was, although we lost some volunteers because of loss of confidence, loss of health, changed circumstances, we actually got new volunteers and some of them newer. And the hub is now even more important as a community resource, especially for the bereaved. Online morning prayer and services have grown the community of faith. And service with Thornton Parish Council and the other Thornton churches during the pandemic to help those in need, and then the dedication of our new community orchard to those who both served us and those who died in 2020, was recognised as a real community force for good in being given the freedom of the borough. And that was real testimony to how the church was viewed as a blessing, when previously both churches had been quite anonymous and mainly only open on a Sunday. So compassion and commerce have transformed both the church community as well as enlarged its footprint and enabled it to grow in seeking justice and loving mercy and walking humbly and more gently alongside and with and part of its community. I'm really thankful and proud to have been part of this amazing journey, some of which is easily replicated. One church in Crosby came and borrowed one of our churches and tables, took it back, and they now have a kindness cafe in the back of their church a couple of days a week as part of their opening as a result of their need to open for their English Heritage Grant. some of which is unique. But the death of 2 churches has led the resurrection to one, which is now Community Church. And any of you thinking of going to be the next vicar when it is eventually advertised, it's the best church in the diocese.
Thanks so much, Kath. Kath is here, so you can mither her later and talk to her. Jen, where's Jen? Oh, there. So Jen Williams is going to talk to us next.
Good afternoon. My name is Jen Williams, and I am the founder and coordinator of Open Table Sefton in Crosby. In the next 10 minutes, I am going to be talking about our experience at All Saints with St. Fried's Church, Crosby. You heard that right, and you know a bit more about it now, which is great, from Kath, about our developing a new Open Table congregation. Open Table is a growing partnership of Christian worship communities which welcomes and affirms people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, queer or questioning, intersex and asexual, and our families, friends, and all our allies. I'm not sure when something new becomes something old and established, but our Open Table group has been running at All Saints with St. Fried's now for 5 years. I've got a beautiful photograph from our community hub of the congregation celebrating our 2-year anniversary. The main aspect of our service is hospitality and sharing, eating together around the table. There are 2 themes I'm going to focus on in thinking about developing a new congregation. Number 1, before establishing something new, it's important to appreciate fully what already exists and working carefully alongside your existing context. And 2, when establishing something new, early on, develop a structure of support and be open to the unexpected. And if it is going to be authentic, inclusive space, offering hospitality, it must be shaped by the people that come. I was actively attending Open Table in Liverpool for 2 years before I thought about setting my own up. This is what attending Open Table meant for me, and I will share a little bit about my personal journey. It has helped in bringing spirituality and sexuality together in a safe space while I was in recovery. I came to know about Open Table through a mental health chaplain who works in Merseycare NHS Trust. I was recovering from an episode of severe illness at this time. Throughout much of this time, I was wrestling with trying to reconcile my sexuality and a newfound Christian faith. I was struggling, but I plucked up the courage to go along to my first Open Table service in May 2015. I saw that Open Table was a safe space. It continually gave me an opportunity to come to God, unhindered by the worry that I am not worthy, that I am not meant to be there, that who I am is wrong. Instead, I was able to fully express myself and embrace who I was before God in worship. I was able to explore my faith and sexuality safely with people who were really able to hear and to really listen and understand. We are able to empathize with each other there, having similar experiences and struggles. Open Table is a place where I have been able to bring my family. When I was coming to my first Open Table service, I brought my mum, because the tagline of Open Table events has always been for the LGBTQIA+ community, family and friends. And there is wonderful significance in this invitation. Open Table is a comfortable space to introduce family to the LGBTQIA+ community. And my mum was able to spend real time with the community there. Open Table is a diverse community. It's for all ages, it's ecumenical. So you have the benefit of understanding different traditions and different styles of worship. It is fully inclusive of all, and all are made to feel welcome. I have found the diversity deeply enriching. Open Table has allowed me to develop deeper connections, meaningful friendships, It has been a place of opportunity, community, hospitality, and spiritual growth. I felt moved to start my own because I was meeting a lot of people who lived 5 minutes away from me that attended Open Table in Liverpool, and it seemed to me that a lot of LGBTQIA+ community events were happening in the city centre, and there was very little going on in the suburbs and the neighbouring borough of Sefton. I have an incredibly supportive church at All Saints with St. Friedwides. They have made me feel very, very welcome, and I wanted to recognise our church as an inclusive space. It took time to set up an Open Table congregation. I had an idea in July 2016 that I'd like something to happen in Sefton. I wasn't sure what that was, but when I was sitting down talking with Kath, who was my vicar, my vision was a group that would offer a community space. Kath suggested using the church space. Soon after, I wrote a letter proposing the development of an Open Table group at church, which was put to the PCC in September 2016. In September 2016, the PCC went on an away day in which they explored the theology of sexuality and queer theology. It was crucial that the PCC were actively involved and that it was carefully put forward and considered, as Open Table should become a foundational point of our church rather than something at the side of it. In all, the process of starting an Open Table at my church took 11 months, from the idea to the official start date on the 11th of June 2017. When establishing something new early on, develop a structure of support, be open to the unexpected, and if it is going to be authentic, inclusive, offer hospitality, it must be shaped by the people that come. Things to note. It was important to become an inclusive church, and the church became an inclusive church in December 2016, before Open Table started. This ensured that churches, this network ensures that churches are seen on the list of inclusive churches and allows people to explicitly know about the efforts being made to ensure that they are welcome. It was important to get an idea of what Open Table was and how it might run before starting my own. And I've been attending an Open Table service, and it was important to learn more from established groups to see how Open Table is run before considering. It was important not to run Open Table on my own and to have a team. I have an amazing congregation with so many different gifts in music, in art, and in creative and in baking. So I've been able to use their gifts and really develop this ministry. Each Open Table is unique and each service is different. And it is important that you work within your own context and don't assume people who aren't LGBTQIA+ won't be interested. A lot of people are interested in Open Table for reasons other than their sexuality. It can be the fact that it is an evening service, if yours is in the evening. It can be the fact that it's an open and inclusive space, or that you do communion or the service in a different and unique way to what we've been used to. So I found it was important to make sure I invited everyone at my church. That's me. There's another photograph. We've been able to, during the lockdown, we set up a community garden space, a herb garden space, and we were just able to really have amazing space there. It's been a wonderful project that we've been able to do together. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. That was really, really good and really interesting. There's lots in each of these for us to think about. I'm going to ask Kathy Versfeld to come up now, who's going to talk to us about Strawberry Field, which I visited when we were allowed to visit places. And it was lovely. It was a gorgeous day, as I remember. So Kathy's going to tell us about Strawberry Field. You tell me when you play the video.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I hope you're not all asleep already, hey? Well, thank you for the invitation to come. As you've seen there, my name is Kathy Versfeld, and just a couple of words of introduction. I'm not from hereabouts. I'm sure you can pick that up. I grew up in Cape Town, which is another of the beautiful cities of the world. I love Liverpool. I've lived here in Liverpool itself since last October, and I think it's just a fabulous place. A bit like Cape Town, just a bit cooler. Just a fabulous place, wonderful sense of community. And my journey in the Northwest began 3 years ago when I received news of my latest appointment. I am a Salvation Army officer, and for the last 20 years, my husband and I have been in shared ministry across the country, leading churches, essentially. But 3 years ago, I received a separate appointment, and that was to be the new mission director for the centre that would be opening at Strawberry Field. Now, it has been quite a journey of exploration these last 3 years. The first year was a bit of a roller coaster ride. When I looked through those gates the very first time, there was nothing there. And I knew in a year, the centre had to be built. And I knew that only by God's grace would that happen. 2 years ago now, almost exactly in September 2019, we opened the gates of Strawberry Field for good. And here is just a little snapshot of what the new centre, the new mission, looks like within Strawberry Field.
Well, Strawberry Fields is something that John had because he used to live next door to this place called Strawberry Fields, which was a Salvation Army place for kids. And he used to book over, and it was his little magic garden to sort of play in.
Strawberry Field is a really important place to people's fans. It was such an important place to John. It's got this magical kind of ethereal quality, hasn't it?
So, that children's home that was opened in the 1930s by the Salvation Army did, I believe, a wonderful work for about 70 years of caring for the vulnerable children across the Liverpool area. And then in 2005, the centre was closed with the recognition that perhaps it was time for us to do something new. And for about 10 years, the Salvation Army engaged in prayer and conversation and research and discussion, trying to figure out what is the unique need now within the community that God is inviting us to get involved in. And what we discovered was that there was a huge need across the country, and particularly in Liverpool, for young adults with learning difficulties who had barriers to employment. We discovered that across the country, although about half people with disabilities wanted to get into work, only about 7% were actually employed. And we thought, well, that sounds like some sort of injustice, you know. We need to do something about that. What can we do? And so the vision was captured and then cast for the centre at Strawberry Field, which would be a learning hub for young adults with learning difficulties, but also any other kind of barrier to employment, where they could get the practical skills that would enable them, and we would support them into paid employment. And the Salvation Army at this point had two choices. They could have said, well, let's sell Strawberry Field, and let's take the money and run and go to a nice safe place where we can build a centre and teach these young people and support them. Or how about we stay where God has placed us, where God seemed to be opening a door? Why don't we stay and engage with our research said 60,000 fans that would come every year. For decades, they were coming every year for decades to stand at those red gates and look through. Many had no idea of the significance of the place, the kind of connection with John, why he wrote the song Strawberry Fields Forever, what used to happen behind the gates. But still they came. And the Salvation Army recognized that there was an opportunity for us to engage. Here was an opportunity for the gospel to engage and to have conversations with people who would not usually connect with our churches or the services that we provided, you know, for the homeless and the addict and the people that were hungry. And so this vision was captured for a place that would not only be a training hub, but also a commercial centre that would help to fund the training in a sort of sustainable way. And then alongside that, the other key components of this new vision was the fact that, you know, it was the centre that the Salvation Army owned, that God had blessed us with. And so we wanted to plant a new expression of Salvation Army Church at Strawberry Field. And so we, by God's grace, in 2019, we were delighted to open the gates. And I remember at the start of 2020, we'd had a few quiet months in 2019 towards the end of the peak season, and then over the winter where it was quieter, but we were preparing for 2020, our first peak season. And I remember on the 2nd of January, I told anyone who would listen to me, right, come on guys, come and visit us at Strawberry Field. We are going to be open every day from today until Christmas Day. And you can come, there's no charge to go through the gardens, you can come to the cafe, the shop, the exhibition, come hear the story. You know, it's not an exhibition that's a Beatles exhibition or a John Lennon exhibition. It's a Strawberry Field exhibition, and it tells the story of Strawberry Field and the connection with the Salvation Army and the connection with the children's home and the connection with John Lennon and the Beatles. And I said, come and see, come and support. You know, join with us as we bring some good out of this place. And it did strike me that there was a great irony that within 2 months, of course, lockdown came, the first lockdown came. And I had in my mind the banner that I'd come up with to sort of encompass the whole vision for Strawberry Field, opening the gates for good. And it wasn't just a sense of for the greater good, for the good of the trainees and their families, for the good of the local communities. They could come and have this wonderful space to journey in and reflect in and discover, you know, the meaning and purpose of life. But it was for good, forever. You know, this place is now, for a long time, Beatles fans and John Lennon fans could not come through those gates. They were locked out because of the children's home. They had no access, but we opened the gates and we said, come on, come in. It's going to be open forever. We're going to make this thing work. We're going to make sure the commercial side connects with the compassion and the kingdom building that we are about and the congregation. And then the centre had to close. And I felt God saying to me so clearly, Kath, it's got to be my plan, not your plan. My plan. You know, gates open for good, sure. Just because the doors were shut to the visitor centre, still the gates were open to do good. And we then had to take our learning, our teaching of the young people online, through online media. And we found ways of connecting with the local community, an affluent local community that many didn't need food, but they needed a listening ear. They needed someone that could run and get a prescription. They needed someone to walk with them and just listen to them, to pay them a visit at Christmas and Easter unexpectedly and just say, here's a card and just something small. We just want to remind you that you loved, you're not forgotten. And so we have learned so much through lockdown, and it's been great to share something of the experiences that we've all had and the positives and the negatives. But for us, the most important thing and the biggest caveat I think I have as we try and connect commerce and culture with kingdom and compassion and congregation and church, the caveat is always, it's got to be God's plan. And for us, that meant praying throughout the process. The first thing we did when we took possession of the brand new building, after I found the cups and made a cup of tea for the movers, was to pray. To prayer walk the entire site. And when we went into lockdown, every day at noon, we would pray online. Every day, and so it has continued. Every day we invite visitors across the site to pause and to pray. Prayer is an essential part of what we do, learning and listening, not just to God, but to others in our local community, to each other, to other Christians, people of other faiths, and the wider community as well. How am I doing for time? I could carry on for ages, but okay, I think I'm out of time. Just to say that for me, it has to be God's plan, whatever we do, and we have to be creative and we have to think outside the box. But I'm delighted I found where I am, and I hope you find this too, that every day God shows up. And sometimes he shows up in people and activities that I'm sort of not expecting him to show up in. But he's there, challenging, encouraging, affirming, helping me to realize, yes, Lord, you are in this, and therefore I'm here. I'm still here. And I want to encourage you with what you're doing. God is bringing good out of this terrible time we've all been through. And there's been a little talk in my church and other churches about going back. I don't think there's any going back. The only thing we can do is move forwards together as we reimagine a better world, a fairer world. A world, where more people experience that abundant life that Jesus tells us is available to us all. So thank you for listening. I've put some flyers out at the back, look like that, to tell you a little bit more about our new centre. We are open at the moment, Tuesday to Sunday, every day. Do come see us, and be lovely to show you around and to share some more of the great stuff that God is doing. Thank you.
And I do recommend going to visit, and I bet a few of you are now thinking, I wish we'd been featured in a Beatles song. But the challenge to all of us is, what's our equivalent? what is it that we've got that we can use in that kind of way? I promised you earlier that you'd hear from two fairly new HeartEdge people. So we've brought Dave Nicholson and Jo Beacroft-Mitchell. So Dave is going to talk to us. Dave is HeartEdge's new commerce expert who knows all about how to make your church make money. So he's the man you want to talk to. Am I bigging you up in the wrong way here, Dave?
Thanks very much. My name is Dave Nicholson. As Andy said, I'm Commerce Development Coordinator with the HeartEdge Development Team. What I want to talk about today, within a 10-minute limit, is one example of commerce generating finance via enterprise in order to creatively extend mission. So essentially it's all about commerce making a profit which can then kickstart further investment in further financial investment in creatively extending mission. And the case study I want to look at is St Stephen's, Norwich, and their church cafe. There's a case study in more detail on the HeartEdge website. What it's about, essentially, the cafe, is it's an eat, share, pay what's fair church cafe. Provides an open and welcoming space where anyone can come in to buy a meal or drink, no matter what their circumstances. So customers, patrons of the cafe include homeless people from the city centre, ex-offenders just released from Norwich prison, and anyone, shop workers, shop and office workers on their lunch break, or shoppers themselves. It's based on the principle of eat, drink, share, pay what you know is fair. So refreshments are available for a minimum of £1, but people can pay whatever they want. Now that's not a unique model, but in my experience, what is unique about it is that it makes money. It's a commercial success. It's a profit-making enterprise. So much so that the cafe manager and the part-time church community worker are paid for entirely out of the profits of the cafe. So it's a profit-making cafe that helps enhance and extend the church's compassionate ministry. So it's an example of profit creatively extending mission. How does it do that? The church community worker provides support and accommodation for homeless patrons of the cafe and ex-offenders, people in recovery from drug misuse and mental illness. And it does that, the church does that, through a partnership with two organisations, Green Pastures Housing and Hope into Action Housing. These are two Christian social enterprises whose ethical investment model releases the church to help end homelessness. It's profit, it's the use of profit to extend mission, and that brings in additional investment to creatively extend a mission, and it's all done through enterprise creatively extending mission. How does the cafe make a profit if it's pay what you want, pay what you think is fair? Well, the church themselves say it's all about partnership. It was originally set up by the church and Age Concern. But you do need start-up funding. So you need initial funding to kickstart the whole thing. How much it depends on what size of operation you want to set up. But I'm not sure actually off the top of my head what the Norwich one cost to set up. But it was financed by a grant in the form of a gift. Another key thing is that it's volunteers from the church and, crucially, from the cafe patrons themselves that staff the cafe and actually produce most of the food that the cafe sells. This use of volunteers adds value because the cafe patron volunteers get a structure, friends, and a place to belong by actually working in the cafe, albeit on a voluntary basis. The church also emphasises that the lead staff need to be people of faith, because regular prayer with staff and volunteers they see as essential. The volunteers don't need to be people of faith themselves, but they do need to be comfortable with prayer. So, how does this investment that the profit making from the cafe, how does this creatively extend mission? Both Green Pastures and Hope into Action run an ethical investment programme whereby they purchase properties for the homeless to be housed in and supported by local churches or other organisations based on Christian values. This is funded through unsecured loan stock and bank finance, which actually pays investors up to 5% per annum, essentially to end homelessness. So, investment in Green Pastures or Hope into Action finances the first house to house and support the homeless. And this forms a tangible way that people can house and care for the needy. Sorry, my eyes are going. And receive an attractive return. So, what I want to look at now is how we might consider doing the same sort of thing across the Northwest. And how we at the HeartEdge development team can assist churches in doing so. So, the first way of possibly doing this is a direct replication of the St. Stephen's model of cafe profit, pump priming in inward ethical investment, which in turn extends mission. This be particularly applicable to city centre and town centre churches, but could apply across the board, suburban areas, even rural areas. But it would need to be adjusted, developed according to the local context. And there are other spin-offs of the cafe model that would be possible according to the local context, in addition to partnerships with Hope into Action and Green Pastures. One such possible other spin-off would be something along the line of Greens for Good, which is based here in Liverpool, which run hydroponic farming units in their case, in a listed building, and they have suggested that church buildings would be equally appropriate for similar food production. Profit-making hydroponic farms in church buildings, supplying church cafes, food banks, pantries, veg box delivery schemes. Other spin-offs of the Green Pastures and Hope into Action model would be possible according to the local context. And one such other spin-off is the Build a Life programme, which was originally piloted by Blackburn Cathedral and is now planning to run training and employment opportunities for homeless people in refurbishing Green Pastures and Hope into Action properties for themselves and for others in need. So, finally, what can we at the HeartEdge development team do to help churches do similar things? Firstly, we can work with you to identify commercial opportunities in your particular local context. Secondly, help with business planning, getting the startup funding, and thirdly, supporting implementation of the business plan in whatever way is appropriate. And to get hold of us, just contact us at the HeartEdge website, and our various emails are there, or have a word with me afterwards.
Thanks, Andy. The microphone's too high, can you hear me? I always need to bring my own box, it's fine, it's all right. So it's all right, it's all right, it's okay. Same problem everywhere I go. So my name's Jo Beacroft-Mitchell, and whereas Dave's C is commerce, mine is congregation. Now there's two of us in the team with congregation in our title, and that's because my remit is a bit of a floating one across all 4 C's, because I kind of come from a background of fundraising, funding advice, and project development. So I've been given a bit of a remit to kind of spread across all 4 of the C's wherever anybody needs any help with funding, fundraising ideas, moving projects on. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I am 2 months into the job, and I've been having loads and loads of really, really interesting conversations, and it's really interesting to hear the conversations that are going on here today, because I think what we're hearing a lot is that this is a moment of reset, it's a real moment of opportunity, and it's also a moment of flux. Everybody's saying to me, we've got some brilliant ideas, we want to do all of them, but we just don't know where to start at the moment, because we don't know, in the way that we did before, what we've got. So we're all in, I guess that would be my message to you, we're all in the same place, and it is a place of opportunity. But I think we just also need to be kinder to ourselves and accept that it's time to take a breath and then start again. So that's what I would bring to you. We were asked to bring concrete examples of ways that the development team are going to be working. So in a second I will introduce to you the Heart and Anchor benefice in Bradford BD3. They're a very new church to the HeartEdge network. In fact, they're not really full members yet. We're getting there, we'll get them. But we've been talking to them about a range of different things that they're going to be doing. I'll let them introduce themselves because they'll give you a flavour better than I will. Just 1 second, Andy. And then I'll talk you through some of the ways that we're looking at supporting at them. What I would say is that we're here to be your resource. We're here to listen to you, to walk with you and develop things that you want to do in your context. We're not in the business of saying, here's a project with all its branding, we want to plonk it on you. So wherever we go, we'll be working with you on your own ideas. So I'll hand over to Rosie.
Hello.
That's it.
My name's Rosie Clare.
So, I mean, I think that it just gives you a great flavour of that kind of church. You can see they've got a lot going on. What she doesn't mention there is that Community Works, which she mentions, and the Anchor Project were both charities that were incubated by the church, but they're now independent charitable partners who work with the church and in buildings adjacent to the church. And one of the things I think we're finding in our case studies is that partnership is really, really key to developing successful projects. We don't need to do it on our own. We can actually just be facilitators and incubators for stuff that then goes off and has its own life. So in terms of the ways we're looking at working with Heart and Anchor, St Augustine's has a window with a heart. The other place, St Clement's, has an anchor, hence the name. St Augustine's is an amazing collapsed church with a great big glass atrium built into what is left of the church. So they've got a street level cafe space that was just used for congregational coffee, but they're looking at ways of developing that into a cafe. So Dave and I are going to go over and talk to them about possibly developing the cafe idea in with them. Because of the shape of the space, it's multi-use, it's possible to use it for conferences and meetings and things like that. So we're looking at exploring ways of helping them to do that. There's a mezzanine which would make a fantastic exhibition space. So again, they're full of really popping ideas, and I think our role is to walk with them and work out which of these ideas are the most viable and how we're going to help them take them forward. They already had the local library shut down, so they already had the community library in the space before lockdown. And echoing some of the stuff we've said, they want to reopen it, but they want to reassess what it's for and how it's working and how they can capitalise that and make it bigger and better. So I think the community library is one of the first things we're going to start working with them. I'll say the open air garden, basically the old altar is still there outside in a kind of courtyard, complete with pulpit. So if nothing else, we must get a version of Romeo and Juliet in there. It's got to happen. So they're looking at ways of developing that into a garden and also a performance space outside of the church. And they've got this great idea. They've got a couple of people in the congregation who run a local cleaning business. So capitalising on what they've got, again, it's finding out what you have. They're thinking of working that into some kind of social enterprise to support the older people in the community, but also to give training to people who are asylum seekers who have now got leave to remain, but who are finding it hard to access employment or get into employment. So they're looking at ways of developing that. And again, Dave and I are going over next week after, to talk to them about that. The other church in the partnership is St Clement's. As I say, the Anchor project is connected to them. They're already working with the diocese and the DAC on developing an eco-church there, putting in ground source heating. It's a great barn of a place, freezing cold. And they've done some work with community gardening projects there, so we're hoping to bring all of that together to turn them into an eco-church. One of the things, the reason I'm introducing this to you is one of the things we're exploring with them, if you put it on, is something called a pastoral community partnership. Now, this was something that was an embryonic idea in the Diocese of Leeds pre-COVID. What we were finding is that the community were desperate for space in some places because the church is the last building standing. And the church were desperate for income, which then sets up a sometimes problematic contractual relationship, shall we say, between the small congregation who want it all neat and tidy and the community who want to come in and use it. And we were finding in a lot of places there was some struggle and friction there that was holding back partnership working and things like that. So we've come up with something called the Pastoral Community Partnership. This was a friend of mine when I worked in the Diocese of Leeds. Which is a set of principles rather than a contract, where you get the community and the church community to come together and establish what their shared vision and what their shared values are. So you start from, we both want good things for our community. How do we explore that? And so we can find common ground before we start working together. We're then looking at taking this and working up working agreements between the community and the church so that we can start to bring them together to work together more cohesively, rather than just having this contract where you pay us rent and we give you space and then we shout at you because the toddlers make a mess. So we're kind of aiming to build long-term relationships there. It's worked in the Venerable Bede in Leeds, so we're hoping to explore it at St Clement's in Bradford and maybe make it something that HeartEdge can help individual churches develop. In terms of aspirations for that, I can see loads of ways in which we can then use that to kind of expand how the church integrates with the community. The Venerable Bede especially is a barn of a Victorian building surrounded by empty mill buildings. So in terms of the value of the land, if the diocese had to take it on because it's close to closure, it's just going to cost them a fortune in security. They're going to have to shutter it. They're going to have 24-hour CCTV because there's so many buildings around there. One more empty big building is not terribly valuable. So the diocese don't want to do that. But at the same time, they're conscious, as you were saying, that congregation isn't necessarily viable in the long term. So we're talking to the DSC, we're talking to the diocese about how we might transfer some of those buildings into community ownership based on these shared values and start a development with the understanding that we allow the existing congregation to continue to worship there and hopefully be revitalised by everything else that goes on in there. So it's a model that we're looking at to help to develop those relationships with dioceses and make use of these buildings that are struggling at the minute. Where the congregation is still viable, I'd like to think of it as a way of looking at how we share control of the building, how we share and strengthen those relationships, and how we get the community engaged in ownership of the building as a community resource, as well as a relationship with the church. And then, echoing what we've said about asset-based community development, the idea of going back to shared values and having a working agreement is very much based on this idea of empowering the local community to identify what they want to use our church spaces for. So that we kind of take a step back and say, you need the space, we've got the space, but we're not going to tell you what we think you want. We're going to talk to you and we're going to work out together what we can do together as a facilitator rather than just as a landlord. So that's just a flavour of the sort of thing I think the development team are working on. Obviously it will be very, very different in every context, but we've just started, so if you do want to talk to us, just give us a shout. Thank you.